All right. So from planning and strategies around planning and how to plan better, we're going to go to mindsets. Specifically, the mindsets of design leaders, and many of you in this room are design leaders, and the ways that they're thinking about how they do their jobs, what do they need to focus on. And this is actually from a study that Figma partnered with the Design Executive Council to run. I'm really excited for you to hear some of the stories. So we have Purvi Shah from Target, Alex Hsiao from CNN, Christina Goldschmidt from Warner Music Group. People are excited. And Gordon Ching from the Design Executive Council. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Welcome, everyone. Good morning. It's so nice to have you here. I'm so excited to represent the Design Executive Council, and here with me we have Purvi Shah from Target. How many of you shop at Target? Woo! We have Alex Hsiao. How many of you watch CNN? And we have Christina Goldschmidt from Warner Music. And how many of you have listened to Dua Lipa or Ed Sheeran? So I'm here to just quickly introduce what Design Executive Council is. We're here to advance strategic design leadership to the highest levels of business. Today, we are proud to represent over 3.3 trillion in market cap and 3 trillion in annual revenues. And we're here to really represent design leadership at the highest levels and figure out how do we help more designers show up in the boardroom, in the C-suite, and figure out the answers to that equation. So what I wanted to ask for the icebreaker today is, what was that moment when you moved from output to outcomes? Let's kick it off with Christina.
Actually, I'm going to take us back to 2007 when I was in B school and I was working at Scott Galloway's activist hedge fund. And I actually was in charge of the story and the deck for the investment thesis for a proxy battle against the New York Times. And I'm happy to say that we won and we got Scott a board seat.
So, Alex?
I think mine's more recent, but I'll take it back to some of my former consulting days leading up to it. A lot of it was output to outcomes, but more recently was actually with CNN 5 years ago with a pitch to the former CEO of Warner Media and the CEO of CNN.
Purvi?
Yeah, I would say, I've had the opportunity to work at organizations that were really born in tech, but also other organizations that were founded 60 plus, 70 plus years ago. And so early days of my career, when it was really telling the story of digital experiences and the fact that it wasn't just a tactic, it was actually central to the organization's strategy. And we needed to actually think about investing differently, our priorities were different, our workforce was different as a result. That was really the shift in terms of helping our leadership tell that story and get really close to the why behind that.
And today we really wanted to unpack in this research is how are design executives expanding that relationship between design and business. And we know today in this economic climate, profitability, efficiencies, value is even more important, and there's less space to really hide. And I think impact and results really matter. And so in this kind of case study today, we want to expand tangibly how these three design leaders are impacting business. And so what we have brought to you today is three mindsets we discovered in these 5 stories, 3 with us today. The first one is the design entrepreneur. The second is the design visionary. And thirdly, the strategic unifier. I won't go into expanding on them today because we're going to go straight into the story so you guys can see what it looks like in practice. One of the things that we really enjoyed in doing this research, we discovered it's a really fluid mindset. It's not so much about ranking the mindsets. If anyone has done watercolor, you know when you're putting that paintbrush, structures break, go in and out, and you got to improvise and find the right medium. And we think strategic impact requires that continuous calibration of when is it right to apply the right mindset. So to start it off, Christina, everyone has talked about this photo. Tell us about the business situation at Warner Music. You just started pretty recently.
Yeah, I joined them in September of 2023, and I'm about to hit my year mark, which I'm excited about. And what was happening is that Warner Music Group is about $6 billion in annual revenue and has about 6,000 employees across the globe. And we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of record labels, as well as we have songwriting publishing. And we're really in the midst of a transformation. We got a new CEO at the start of 2023. And when I came in, they told me, we need to redesign our distribution tool because it's not competitive. We're not proud of it. Go. And that was, 2 weeks on the job. And so my idea was, okay, I have to build this team, figure out our new ways of working, and also redesign a major piece of enterprise software. And so what I did was I brought my entire team together and really tried to use that as leverage to innovate and help move us forward.
Next, we have Alex. What was that situation at CNN?
Joined 5 years ago, and at the time was really thinking about how we actually start to make news more relevant and timely, but more so in the sense that that's more humane and more direct to the customers and audience. So one of the big things where we start to think through around disruptions around the media space was around how we start to think about the experience in a very human sort of way. And I think that's one thing that I was fortunate enough to be able to start to craft sort of the team, the structure, and the experience around us, specifically around a lot of the cross-functional partnership throughout the organization, the thinking about design in a different way.
Purvi?
Yeah. Well, maybe first a little bit about Target and then the case study itself. So Target is a top retailer, and we really focus on delivering on the notion of trend, quality, of value. And we also put the humans that we serve at the center of everything we do. And so just to give you a little sense of scale, 96% of American consumers have shopped our brand. And when we think about serving them most effectively, we actually like to put ourselves in that mindset by referring to the people that shop with us, not as customers, but actually as guests. And so this puts us in the mindset of being in service to them. And ways that shows up for us is, the love, the care that we put into our $30 billion a year own brands business. It's also showing up in the way in which we meticulously craft our merchandising strategy or the in-store experience. And so it's no surprise when people tell me that, they go into a Target looking for a gallon of milk and they walk out with a basket of goodies they really can't find anywhere else. And so, what we're finding is that there is a deep emotional connection to our brand. Now, when I first started at Target, and this is about, almost 2 years ago now, but there was really an opportunity to bring that emotional connection into our digital guest experience. And so the case study that we talk about is that this was not just a nice to have, but this was really a business critical imperative. And it also took a little bit of a cultural shift to get there and to deliver as a result.
For sure. So to kick it off, we're going to talk about the design entrepreneur. This mindset is really about characterizing proactive and tangible approaches to innovation. I think it's one of the designer's superpowers, making it tangible. To kick us off, Christina, let's talk a little about the WMG mandate, the turnaround. How did you bring craft to the forefront? What was that hybrid swarm model that you introduced at the company?
Yeah, so I took this very challenging project that I was talking about just a second ago as an opportunity to really experiment on how I would build my team structure, how I could reset the culture of the team, and also create new ways of working, both within my team and also cross-functionally. And so looking at that project and saying the best thing that we can do to accelerate this and make sure that we are looking for a competitive and innovative approach to our software problem was to do a design sprint, right? Going back to our craft and using the tools that we have. Because through it, you can understand all of your team dynamics. I could help my team really see that they could do something really amazing and really quickly by following that process, being focused on the customer and the research, and diverging and converging all in a fast period of time, and using it to guide the strategic approach to what we were going to do for that piece of software.
I think there's a common perception that large companies need really large teams. I think something interesting is you move from a very large design team to a much smaller. Let's talk a little bit about that to expand on the value.
Yeah,
Focus.
absolutely. So I worked at a well-known double-sided marketplace where we followed the squads model, and the design team I had was 92 plus people when I left there in August. And at Warner, we're trying to have ruthless prioritization and make sure that we are not building that kind of same big corporate approach so that we can really tackle the most important problems at a time. So I developed a hybrid approach, what I call a swarm model, which is where we take my entire team when we need to solve a challenge and we do that design sprint. And then and then we will save a couple of the designers to help basically make it shovel ready, operationalize it, do all the wires and the edge states. But we're trying to do as much great innovative work as we can, as fast as we can, by working together and working quickly. So it's sort of a hybrid approach to how agencies sometimes work. And that really works for us because we don't have to make a huge investment. My team size is about 20-ish people, and that's not just design. That's design. That's actually content design, research, design systems, design operations. And we can do a lot with little and really drive a lot of strategic value.
Alex, CNN, no small operation. Tell us a little bit about your design team. You're really on a path to elevate the digital experience. What is that kind of startup mindset that you're bringing to?
Yeah, and actually, I was going to say it's very much of that lean startup mentality and approach. And one of the things too, is think about the operation of CNN. We're 24/7. We're reaching across 200 countries, and we have about 150 million unique monthly visitors coming to us for as actually as factive source of truth and news. So one of the things that you start to think about the events that are taking place that are constant and it's moving all the time. How do we move at a rapid pace, right? And how do we actually get there? And I think a big part of it is that lean mentality and thoughtful process and how you actually drive to the outcome.
Purvi, you talk a lot about one team. What's the kind of operation at Target?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, certainly through the work that we're doing, we're finding that in order to do big things, we really have to do it together, which means building that trust, building that connection between product, engineering, data science, UX, right? All of the functions within the discipline of design as well, in order to be able to push each other a little bit, have the right conversations, really be able to get down to the nitty-gritty so that, again, we can have a shared vision and move towards that together. So, it's something that certainly comes through in the case study, but I would also say that even a year and a half, 2 years later, we were still hyper-tracked on that idea of the one team and continuing to invest in that and building that as a leadership team because, again, when you have that trust and when you have that connection, you can do anything.
But I think one thing we're talking about in the design entrepreneur mindset is that it's not just about taking the requirements and delivering it, but how are you showing up in strategy, identifying that opportunity for outcomes? You want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's when you are business focused as a design leader, you can see the full forest and the trees. And that helps you understand how to inform your team, point them at the right thing, and not get distracted by all the noise. I think that's really what it's about. And that's how you look for the most innovative thing that's going to drive your company forward and helps your team look through all of the ideas that they've come through and say, what's going to meet what we need to do from a pure business standpoint, but also meets the customer needs, but also is competitively different. So when you're thinking that way and looking that way, you can really achieve those leapfrog approaches.
And I think one thing we notice a lot in these stories is bridging that distance, revenue, impact, meaning towards, the outcomes from design.
Yeah.
The next mindset that we want to talk about here is the design visionary. This is really about enhancing the organization's strategic clarity, the foresight to look forward, and the readiness for transformation and change. Purvi, let's talk a little bit about humanity and business. How does that come together and how does that enrich success?
Yeah, it's a great question. And maybe I'll actually take a step back to when I first started at Target because in my first few weeks, a lot of folks would ask, like, what's your vision for X, Y, or Z? And, I thought it was really important to embrace that beginner's mind, not just with a sense of curiosity. Yes, of course, curiosity, but I think also a sense of humility in the fact that as a new leader coming into the organization, I actually needed to learn. And so from the standpoint of best practices, I know that each of us in this room of design leaders, we probably know, right, what those best practices are for our specific industry, our specific vertical. We probably can intuit some of the trends that are happening. We see that coming. We probably also have an understanding of where the user's needs are. But to also think about where you want to go long term and to be able to set that vision, you also have to kind of check your assumptions at the door. And you really do need to almost, take your own advice to do that discovery, to go deep and understand both from a human perspective of what your in our case, our guests needed, but also from the standpoint of understanding from the organization itself or wherever else you need to seek that insight to understand what the true, durable, differentiated opportunity also is. And so, within this body of work, me coming in as a newer leader to Target, there was definitely an opportunity to say, how can we demonstrate some quick wins? How can we start getting the momentum going? And so we did, right through this one team approach. Our UX team, along with our product, our engineering, our other partners across the org, we definitely set out to start delivering, right? So we improved things like our search, our navigation, our personalization, the way in which we were storytelling, the way in which we were really making our guests feel seen and known. But then concurrently to that, I also personally took some time to have a go slow to go fast moment. And I talked to a number of our C-level and a number of our senior leaders across the organization. And I will tell you that I uncovered gold. And really through those discussions, through those conversations, those stakeholder interviews, and really immersing then a small carve out of capacity, both in terms of research as well as design, some highly strategic talent that we have, right? Also really exceptional at their craft. We then started to model out what does this intersection of serving the human need, in addition to thinking strategically about the business opportunity and understanding where technology is going, how could we really bring all of that together to deliver a vision that was both differentiated and resonant, but also that every single part of our business could see themselves within? And I think the unique challenge for us at Target is that for our digital guest experience, many of our orders are actually fulfilled through our stores network, right? And so it's not just digital over here doing something. We actually need the full breadth of the business. And so our team, our UX team, actually supports the full breadth of the enterprise. And so being able to tap into our teams in supply chain, in store operations, in merchandising capabilities, and all of the other areas in order to deliver that seamless experience where it did resonate, both in terms of near term and long term, I think that was the opportunity that we traversed.
There's user research, there's stakeholder research, and understanding your executives. Christina, I know you talk a lot about building trust in strategy.
I totally resonate with what you're saying about quick wins that then allow you the space to go slower. And that project that I was talking about was really super fast, but it gave me in my first month or first 2 months that win of everyone said, wow, this team can do this now. We can come together and do this now. And then it allowed me to build trust and let everyone see what we were going to do, what we were going to be capable of, and that the UX team was there showing up to drive that business value so that now we can be at the forefront of driving strategy for the organization through design, through visioning, through helping to bridge that gap of translation and storytelling with our labels who don't understand how technology works and how we operate.
Small enables more?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Alex, we're going to talk a little about strategic unifier. This is about creating the conditions for the optimal organization to really serve the company's mission objectives. I don't think it's ever static. Alex, I know you're at CNN, but you're also part of WBD.
Just for the record, we're not the same company.
Yeah. So that Warner, we're different now.
You talked a lot in the case studies about connected design reviews, how that helped unify design across disconnected groups. Sure, what happened?
Yeah, and just to back up a little bit too, I think when we're talking about some of the previous mindsets, I think a big part of it too is we start to take that strategy into practice. Big part of it is the culture, and the culture across within your teams, your partners, and as an organization, how do you start to harness all these mindsets and this frameworks that you start to put into play? So I think that's an ongoing thing. I don't think you just flip culture overnight. And obviously you have to have the strategy in place, but there's always a saying, it's like culture eats strategy, right, for breakfast. And I think there's a big part here as you start to think about these mindsets and the time it's going to take to implement some of these. Now, some are much faster. Some things happen much quicker. I think broadly speaking, though, I think we're going back to the mindset and unifying aspect. It takes an effort, like a Herculean effort of just persistence, continuity, and just keep going and going and going.
And I think there's a lot of companies actually have disconnected pockets of design. Yep. And now you're trying to form a community. How large is it now in this?
Right. So one of the things across CNN, which is interesting when you start to think about broadly with across Warner Brother Discovery, we have these, I don't want to quote this wrong number, but I would say right now, based on our connection to bringing forth of a design town hall, we have roughly about 200 plus designers that are all joining into the fray and sharing and connecting around their experiences around what they're doing on streaming side with Max, what they're doing with Magnolia Networks, with Oprah, in our case with news too. And we're sharing a lot of the aspects of how we can start to be more informative, even though we might be in a completely different space, from news to entertainment, to life events and so forth. But I think one of the things as we start to come together, there's so much sharing in moments where the designers can start to empower themselves to understand that they have so much more fortitude and opportunity to make things happen. And so it's really setting up the stage for that. Yeah.
I think one thing that's interesting about connection and the cohesion, Purvi, you talked a lot about stakeholder interviews, that North Star that was formed with your team. I don't think it's just doing the interview, it's actually the building of the trust through that process, unify them. Talk a little about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think from an internal perspective, we all, know that we might be incentivized by different things. We might also be bringing our unique lens or perspectives to the table. And, I think just having, again, that go slow to go fast moment where you can actually hear each other and actually find the insight within that is a really big trust building moment as well. And so I would say that, from the standpoint of strategic unifier, I think it also means that is the role that we as a discipline can really lean into, because we excel at that notion of discovery, right? We excel at that notion of research and empathy. And so being able to take some of that methodology that we put towards the humans that we serve to also putting that towards our partner team, right? That is a really interesting place to start to be able to operate. And then when you bring that into the work, it's just even more rich and layered and really resonant as a result.
Thinking back to outputs to outcomes, let's think about how these three mindsets have now manifested. Can you talk a little bit more about the before and after to help summarize for the audience?
Yeah. I think it's really, in my mind, back to that fluidity and knowing that you are a whole person and you have a toolkit, be it a design toolkit or a strategic toolkit, and how to call on the combination of the two is the real superpower.
Purvi?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the way it plays out is it's a few different dimensions, right? It's the work itself. So ideally, through some of this, you're raising the bar on quality, on craft, on the impact you're making for those whose lives you're looking to make better, right? So that's really exciting. I think in addition to that, building the right relationships across your organizations, right? Building that trust, back to the strategic unifier, being able to go fast together. That's the goal. But then, underneath all of that, it's the culture. It's the culture of recognition. It's the culture of seeing each other, understanding that we each bring our own kind of unique values, skills from our own disciplines and functions into the equation is really exciting as well. And I think that from that standpoint, I do think it takes a little bit of bravery from the standpoint of design, of UX, because we're also then needing to show up and show out a little bit differently. We're not just executing. We're actually being the glue to the organization. We're facilitating some of that change, and we each have a role to play in that as well. So I think staying kind of connected to that as a superpower unlocks something for us as well.
Yeah, to add to that, I think you'll see it in the white paper, and hopefully you do. One of the things that we did at CNN was what we call Project Elevate. The notion around how to go about unifying design, the understanding what design can do, what it does, and you start to think about the disparate sort of functions around covering it 24/7 or operating at 24/7 news organization. You have broadcasts, you have control rooms, you have editorial teams, you have the journalists, you have obviously legal and so forth. You start to think through around these challenges of how you actually start to unify these pockets of amazing journalists that are out there telling the stories and covering news. But if you start to think about what is design, right? How do you start to manifest that and to get the organization to understand the impacts that design can do? And you have to think about it from the standpoint, it's like people are moving quick, right? There's breaking news that's coming. Gotta go. So you start to take a step back and have the understanding, like, in order for this to work, you have to have these outreach programs. You have to have these very intentional sort of, in some ways, conversations that is somewhat Machiavellian. Okay, I don't want to get too deep into that, but you are setting the stage, right? And to really understand these conversations, these inputs, these frameworks you're putting in, it's going to manifest in a certain way. You have to stay very fluid, almost kind of like water as things are moving through. And one of the things I highlighted with Project Elevate was interesting is that we started to get into the minds and the thinking around what design does, around what is premium and modern user experience in the world of news. And that is now have resonated throughout because it's being brought up now more so than ever and saying, as we start to think about user experience, oh yeah, the things that we're thinking about elevation and elevate, how do we start to bring that into practice across all of what we do? So that's been, it's been a good thing for us.
I think one thing we see a lot in any kind of the research and the cases we did is design leaders taking interest beyond design.
Yeah.
Right? To the business, to the stakeholders, to various areas of the entire supply chain. And I think that's such a central theme to your ability to unify and then set the conditions for success.
Definitely.
For those who haven't read the white paper, it's available free. You can read it instantly. There's a QR code to access it right away. It also features Arne Bomick, who shares his story at IBM as Chief Design Officer of IBM Products, and also Greg Petroff, who was the former Chief Design Officer and VP of Cisco Secure. So to summarize it here, what is that key takeaway you really want people to leave with? Because I know we talked a lot here. We can easily forget on this panel. What is that key takeaway you want people to leave with, Christina?
I think really these are hard jobs, and orchestrating all of these things and keeping all of these balls moving is stressful. But we do this because we have a passion for it and because we love it. And we could do so many other things. And so make sure that you are having fun. Try to leave your stress at the door. Words of wisdom from someone I just met backstage. And really just go with the flow sometimes, because it's gonna be a different problem on a different day.
Like that. I guess I'll go. Yeah. It's interesting. I think there's so much being discussed and covered here, but I'll probably leave just one parting thought as we're thinking about this conversation. I go back to the people. People constantly that you're going to constantly surround yourself with, whether it be your team, your partners, your colleagues, folks that probably you may or may not talk to at this point, but you will. And I think that's one of the things that you start to think about the strategic mindset as you start to progress and move forward. It's such a key component to your success in your career. Focus on the people, whether it be your team members, right? That may be your future bosses, as well as thinking about the people in terms of who you work with and the things that you were trying to instill in terms of it's really propelling that design culture throughout your organizations.
I love that. Maybe I will go back to something Christina said, which is all the tools in the toolkit. And as design folks, there are a lot of tools we have in the toolkit. And so, really step into that, own that, believe in that, because those tools are so versatile and they can be applied in so many contexts. In fact, a lot of this is just like a massive service design kind of effort, right? And so when you think about slowing down, again, theme for me today, right? Like just pausing and reflecting and saying, how can I actually take the skills I already have and apply them to this particular situation? I think there's a lot of richness there too. And so just back to we have the resources, we have the know-how, just again, taking those moments to reorient is really important.
It's almost like when you're an artist, you have many tool brushes, mediums, a canvas. I think you guys have thought about business almost as your own craft, right? And I think that's a really powerful unlock.
Yeah, if I may just add one more thing. There's the artistry that goes within, it goes behind what we do as designers and as design executives. The other part is almost think of yourself as an athlete as well, right? There's that performance mindset. You got to go into each game and you always have to be on. So I think that's a mindset that I think it carries through regardless what you love in your career. Yeah.
Well, with that, we're right on time. So thank you to our panelists and thank you for taking the time to listen and be here with us today.